have an international guest speaker today who is actually the VP of Product Management at In-House Interactive, hailing all the way from one of my favourite towns in the US, in Chicago, and stopping off from coming from Australia. We are indeed welcome for the timeliness as I bring up on stage someone who's responsible within In-House Interactive for deriving in their contact centre products, and for over 25 years has actually delivered CRM solutions and contact centre solutions to a tune of over $500 million. So we're fascinated to learn and gain insight from an international guest speaker of his calibre. Please put your hands together and welcome to the stage Mr. John Cray.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Microphone? Okay. So Titch was incredibly inspirational. I just love following a speaker like that. It's like following Winston Churchill or something. You know, it's like. I was thinking on the break, is there something I can say that's sort of a sports story or something like that that sort of lead from one talk into the other? And the closest I can come up with is that makes sense with my topic. Let's see if I can bring my topic up here. Soon. That makes sense is back in 2005, I was actually walking to Wrigley Field, which is in Chicago where they play baseball. There are two baseball teams in Chicago, the Cubs and the White Sox, and it's almost like the North and South in the Civil War. I mean, literally the fans hate each other across the dividing line between the North and South of Chicago. We're from the North side, Cubs fan, walking to the Cubs, which, by the way, won what we call the World Series, which has nothing to do with the world. It's strictly a U.S. thing, but we call it the World Series. And we won last year for the first time in 108 years. 108 years between championships. Won last year, so we're very excited about that. I was walking into Wrigley Field where I was going to be drinking and watching baseball for 4 hours, right? Drinking beer, watching baseball. So maybe this isn't quite as inspirational a story as Titch, but I did make it through the 4 hours. I was green that day. I drank the whole time. I was a green. But I was walking toward the field, and I got a text message on my mobile. And the text message said, buy your Cubs souvenirs at this address, like literally 40 feet from where I was walking. And this was 2005, and GPS had just been introduced to cell phones. Literally, you didn't have any, you know, now we're so used to Google Maps and everything else finding our way around through GPS. That didn't exist up till like 2004. So this was the first time I had actually experienced it. I was literally looking at my cell phone, I was like, I'm looking around like maybe one of my friends has texted me, because I couldn't figure out how they knew I was right next to Wrigley Field. But it was one of the first occasions of, you know, what we now call one-to-one marketing or direct marketing, where somebody knew where I was. Extremely likely I was associated with the ball game that was happening that day and was pitching me souvenirs. But it was a stunning experience. Now, so many years later, we're so used to Amazon targeting us based on what other people like us have bought on Amazon, or, you know, the one-to-one market, our DVR telling us what to watch based on our viewing history. We're so used to that now. But in those days, it was incredibly innovative. And it was stunning. And I remember thinking at the time, is this the future? Is this where we're going with communications? Is it now going to be so personal and so about us? And that's what we're talking about today. So it's 12 years later. The world has moved forward. There are lots of things that have happened along the lines of personal communications and personalizing the experience in the contact center. And that's kind of what we're focused on. And so it is sort of a related story. But I think that's what we're talking about, the future of the contact center and how that relates to the customer experience. Because really, as people who are associated with contact centers, why do we bother with a contact center? It's about the customer, right? We We want to make it as good an experience as we can for that customer. Okay, so customer experience. So putting the customer front and center, because that's what we're all about, right, as contact centers. So I think the tricky bit here is how good are we really at predicting the future? So when I saw that text message on the cell phone, that to me was like a kind of a moving forward moment, and I thought, wow, this truly is the future. And you kind of, sometimes you see things that are very obvious, but sometimes people think they know what's going to happen, but they really don't. And there's a lot of quotes here from relatively famous people over the last century who've thought they knew where the future was going, but of course, Steve Ballmer, Microsoft, the iPhone's not going anywhere, right? Said that 10 years ago. So we're not always right when we look at what's happening in the future. My favorite one is the nuclear-powered vacuum cleaners will be a reality within 10 years. That's my favorite one, and that's by the guy who ran a vacuum cleaner company. So here's my related story on that. So when I was like a little kid, I have a memory of when I was a little kid walking into a shoe store, and there was a machine right at the entrance in the shoe store. This was back in the 1960s, so I've dated myself. A little kid walking in, and there's a little machine, and you stick your feet in the machine, and it shows you an X-ray of your feet. Have you guys ever heard of this? You guys, most of you are way too young for this. You would walk in, there's a little screen on the top. In 1960, the screen was this like cathode ray tube-looking thing, but it would actually show you the skeletal structure of your feet. And so a few years ago, I went to my mom and I said, "Did that really happen?" Because I have a memory of this from when I was a kid. And she said, "Yeah." She said all the shoe stores had it. And of course, when you're a kid, I just kept sticking my feet in and turning it on and X-raying my foot, and then I'd do it again. And now we're like, that's crazy. We were actually radiating our feet back then with X-rays. So obviously that didn't survive into the future. The foot X-ray machine in shoe stores did not make it, into the future. So we don't always know, right? We don't always know what's going to happen. But there are ways of looking into the future based on what we do know today. So there are a number of analyst players who survey the marketplace. And Gartner, many of you have probably heard of Gartner. We actually have some statistics from Gartner in the presentation. But there's a big systems integrator, global systems integrator, DiData, who does an annual survey of over 1,000 contact center managers around the world. And one of the questions they asked was, what does the customer experience mean to you? So when you're conveying services to your customer through your contact center, what difference does it make? And the stats are incredible. The stats basically that came out of these contact center managers, over 80% said the customer is our competitive differentiator. How we appear to the customer versus how our competitor appears to that customer is our dominant differentiator. And Frost & Sullivan, another analyst in the space, said that within a couple of years, customer experience will be more important as a differentiator than the very products you sell, or the price you sell them at, or the brand you use as a company. The most important thing you can do to differentiate your company against others is to give a great customer experience. And who is it that gives that experience to your customers? It's typically your contact center, your agents. They're the brand ambassador for the business. The other interesting thing that came out of survey is that every one of these little bullet points gets hit when you deliver an excellent customer experience. Your loyalty increases. You increase your own employees' engagement. Your agents get happier. Your managers get happier. You increase your revenue and you reduce your costs. All of it is tied to delivering a great experience. So how do we go about doing that? We're going to talk about that. Here's I wanted to kind of put it in perspective. I mean, again, what do we know today? What are we seeing in the market that is a compelling customer experience that tells us something about the future? So here's one very familiar story, right? We've got a patient who is going to visit the doctor. And the first thing that happens, and we're all used to this now, is we get a reminder that we have an appointment coming up. Now, this didn't exist just a few years ago, but now we're extremely used to it. We get a little text message or possibly a pre-recorded voice message that tells us we've got an upcoming appointment. We get it on our mobile, and typically that message says, if you want to change it, click on this link or reply or call us at this number. But typically there's a way to change your appointment if you can't make it. So, click on a link. There's often a little app that comes up or a mobile website that allows us to reschedule the appointment. From there, maybe we need help. Maybe we need to ask a question. Well, some of these apps are now starting to introduce the option to put yourself in queue from the mobile device to actually talk to someone in the contact center. In a healthcare facility, that might be the nurse, right? Or the scheduling person, whoever it is. But you can go directly from the mobile app or mobile website directly into that conversation on your mobile. And then before you go to visit the hospital, the doctor's office, the clinic, it's nice to be able to fill out a form in advance so that you don't have to do it when you get to the office. Huge time saver. So maybe I fill that form out on the mobile device. And then I go visit the doctor. And then after the doctor visit, I've got the post-visit results on a website that are posted, personal, private to me. Only I can see them, but they're my actual results. It's all electronic, and it's all in what we call a customer journey. Because now we've moved from the concept of the individual interaction, I called, I got service, I hung up, to a complete, what's called omni-channel, cross-channel journey, where I'm using all kinds of different forms of communication to solve one problem. And that one problem in this case is the continuous journey of seeing the doctor and getting the results. But what is it that makes this good? What makes this a good journey? Well, for one thing, it's proactive. The doctor's office reached out to me, gave me the appointment reminder. Then they reached out to me to fill out the form. They reached out to me with my results. I didn't have to call them to get the results. That's the old way. The new way is I get sent the information. And it's personal to me, but it's very proactive. It follows a natural progression, right? It goes from one step to the next, but it all makes sense. And each individual step follows on from the previous step. And then, of course, it's personal. It's about me. It's not about the broad thing. It's about me. Everything, every single step along the way is about me. And we crossed how many channels here? We had a proactive notification through SMS or text messages. We rescheduled through a mobile website. I talked over a phone call to a nurse. I filled out a form through the website, and then I also got information through the website. It's multiple channels of communication, all blurred together into one flow. Can this be automated? Can we actually make it as automatic as possible? Well, we want to, right? The proactive notification, we didn't want a human being to have to look through records, and for every individual coming in to the doctor's office, we didn't want them to construct a text message. No, we want to automate that. So the key here is as much of the journey as possible needs to be automatic. And if you look at what's highlighted in blue here, these are all the automatic bits. No human being had to intervene to make those things happen. If you look at the little red bit, we don't have the doctor visit itself here, but we've got the nurse communication. Those are the live service parts. But the vast majority of this journey is an automated one. And that's where we're doing two things at once. And this is where I think the new way of thinking about customer service is coming in. It used to be that we would trade off cost and customer satisfaction. We'd say, you're going to do one at the expense of the other. We'd say, if you're going to save money, it means your agents are going to be on the phone less, and therefore the customer's not going to be as happy. But that's not what we're seeing in this new world. In this new world, we're doing both at the same time. If we can automate things, we're both saving money, because you don't need human beings to do it, and we're increasing customer satisfaction. Because as a patient, I don't want to talk to someone unless I have to. I don't want to call up about my order that I placed last week unless I have to. Why didn't I get my order? I want to look on a website. Even to place the order, I don't want to call up anymore. I want to do it myself. So self-service and automation has become the new way of doing things. And it both simultaneously saves you money as a business, as a contact center, while also improving the satisfaction of your customers. That's the amazing thing. So some of these surveys have said, how do we pull this off? How do we increase customer experience? And they asked, with the data survey, they said, what are the key trends, technology trends, that we can leverage to improve that experience of the customer? And then Gartner asked a similar question in their survey. They said, what are the projects that you have underway that are going to contribute to improved customer experience? And these are the results. And the interesting thing, completely different surveys done in completely different countries with completely different groups, but the amazing thing is the results are the same. The topmost trend is metrics and analytics in both surveys. So if you think about it, it's important, if we're going to do something, that we measure it. How well did we do? And the key trend that everybody is seeing is that people are saying, if the omni-channel journey is now not about individual interactions, then I'm no longer worried so much about things like talk time. I'm more worried about things like, is the customer satisfied with the whole end-to-end journey? And so the metrics are changing. The way we measure customer experience and success is changing. And so a lot of businesses are undergoing a shift in how they measure things. And then as you go down the list, we see self-service, connected journeys, and omni-channel, digital, the move from voice to text-based communications. Those are the trends that are coming out. And it really doesn't matter what survey you look at. There's another survey done by a company that we use sometimes as a sponsor called Contact Babel. They run a survey in the UK and a survey in the US, and it's the same stuff. Everybody's saying the same things. They're focusing on the same kinds of technology projects now to pull off improved customer experience. So let's put those projects up on the board. So these are the ones that everybody's focused on, and the percentages are from the data survey. So those are the percentages that of customers that said they are focused in that area over the next couple of years. Topmost, so almost 2/3 of them said they're focused on analytics. So let's take a look at analytics. How do you go about measuring customer experience in this new world of omni-channel and end-to-end journeys? How do you go about doing that? Well, it's hard. It's hard because we tend to fall back on the old metrics. We tend to fall back on service level. We tend to fall back on talk time. We tend to fall back on counts. How many calls did an agent take today? But there's a certain amount of laziness in falling back on those things, because when you look at what the customer is actually experiencing, those are not the key metrics you care about moving forward. So what do we do? Well, according to one of the surveys, this is actually the Contact Babel survey, so I'm jumping around various surveys here. The ease of resolution is the #1 factor in impacting how a customer perceives their experience. How easy was it for me to get the answer I needed? Followed by my choice of channel, my choice of contact. So if I can measure how effectively I delivered service based on how easy it was for the customer, then I've achieved the #1 rated metric. How do I do that? Well, one way is by looking at the channels themselves. And they took us, the DiData guys took a survey and said, where do you measure quality? Do you measure it in just your phone calls? Or do you measure it in things like emails or things like visits to your website? Where do you measure it? And telephone dominates. Most contact centers today record calls and do some kind of analysis of those calls. We're going to talk about how to analyze them, but they do some kind of, and usually that analysis is picking a random sampling of calls and having a supervisor listen to them and evaluate them. And that's great. But as we extend from calls to the other parts of the journey, now the percentages of contact centers that are actually looking at those other parts starts to fall away. So we're not seeing quite as many focused on how well did the chat go, the web chat, how well did the email go, and how well did the entire journey go fit together. The other thing is, in this new world, we often employ people outside the contact center to solve the customer's problem, and they're in the back office. So in a bank where you're going to close a loan, the agent may handle the initial interaction, but then they engage a loan officer to approve the loan. Well, the end-to-end experience is what the customer experiences, and that's the end-to-end journey. How well did we do? How well did that loan officer do? Did we close the loan in the first call? You know, those kinds of questions are now becoming important questions about overall experience. But fewer and fewer contact centers doing it. So if we look at the techniques in use today, according to the surveys, what are people actually doing to measure the quality of the interaction with customers? 90%, according to the survey, 90% are actually recording calls and analyzing those calls. And then it starts to fall away. 70% are doing surveys of their customers periodically. Send out a form that says, how are we doing? How do you like our service? And then a lower percentage are doing it right after the interaction. They're sending the call directly to a survey or emailing back a survey or sending you on a web form to a survey right after you interact with the contact center. Lower percentage, a much lower percentage, are analyzing calls using automated speech analytics tools, and very few are doing it in real time, meaning as soon as the call happens and then alert the supervisor if there's a problem. And then a very tiny percentage are actually analyzing text. So if we look down the list, what we've done is contrasted the prevalence, how often people are doing this, with the cost. And it's a nice natural curve because the cost of doing real-time speech analytics and text analytics is very high. Those tools are expensive today. However, that is changing. So what we're expecting to see going forward is we're going to start seeing the prevalence, the cost of those moving down and the prevalence of those techniques moving up. And that's what we're going to see in the future, but we're not yet seeing that. So it's higher percentage than I thought it would be for speech analytics, though. So they're saying that almost a quarter of contact centers surveyed are now employing some form of automated analysis of their calls. So that's an interesting trend. That's significantly up from where it was 2 or 3 years ago. So trends to watch. So what if we then look outside of quality metrics and say, how do we connect those journeys together in an omni-channel way? Well, this is interesting. So if we look at contact centers today and what channels of communication they're using, phone still dominates. So even though there's been all this press about everybody is moving away from phone, and millennials, who as contact center managers we're often obsessed with, right? We're often obsessed with what the millennials are doing. We'll talk about that in a second. Phone is still the dominant form of communication into and out of most contact centers. Email is surprisingly high. Email is a good channel if you're going to convey information in a nice, concise, dense way and send in attachments and images and things like that that people want to see. Email's nice. Email's replaced fax, for example, right? Because as a way to provide a signed contract or whatever it is that you needed an fax image for in the past. But then as we move down the list, the surprising thing is, it's a little hard to read, but the within 1 year gray area is really high for mobile chat and mobile applications. So the exists now is in green, and then the dark gray is what people are going to do over the next year. So if you look at what people are focused on over the next year, right in the middle of the chart, we see mobile skyrocketing. So that's where people are focusing their attention on opening up that mobile channel and making sure your mobile website and your mobile apps are enabled so that customers can get what they need and can then interact with a person over their mobile if they need to. Here's the chart that we care about in terms of millennials, right? So if we look at these age groups, they rank the popularity of channels by age. And what's interesting here is social media is absolutely at the top for those under the age of 25. But it quickly drops off after that. It quickly drops off to fourth between 25 and 34, and fifth over 35. So it's a significant difference in terms of channel popularity. But here's some interesting other data points from this chart, right? So telephone is fourth or fifth below the age of 35. Nobody's making phone calls anymore. I saw there's an analyst in the UK that covers the contact center space, a guy named Richard Snow. His daughter, 22 years old, he pays her cell phone bill. She lives at home. And he says she makes 2 phone calls a month. A month. She's on the phone twice. He knows that because he sees her bill, but she's got over 2,500 text messages. And that's how she communicates, right? So that is a vast difference in the communication methods by age of people that we're seeing. But as soon as you get over the age of 35, then we're seeing phone calls skyrocket to first in popularity by age. Email continues to be very popular. It's fifth for the under 25 set, but then is pretty much second in popularity over that age. And again, people in business use email all the time to communicate, and B2B kinds of contact center communications often happen through email. And then here's mobile. Because again, below a certain age group, it's all about mobility, and it's all about being able to get easy access to mobile data, right? So it's an interesting chart in that it shows us that there is a vast difference by age. So what's going to happen is as the lower age groups age into becoming the dominant people that our contact centers communicate with, the prevalence of communication channels will undoubtedly change. And social will undoubtedly become more important over time. But that said, almost 2/3 of agents in contact centers around the world remain dedicated to the phone. About 2/3 of agents don't do anything other than take calls, approximately. 37%, about a third handle some kind of digital channel, web chat, email, whatever it might be. And about 20% do both. So this is what you sometimes call the myth of the blended agent. Do we have agents that are actually handling both voice and chat during the day? They take a call, and then the next interaction is a web chat, and then the next interaction is another call, and then the next one's an email. That's not very prevalent. But it is shifting a little bit, because if you compare the survey year over year, this year to last year, then the agents that remain dedicated to the phone has gone down from 68% to 62%. So it is decreasing, and those that are handling digital channels is going up. So again, as we predict the future, we look at the trends, not necessarily the static data. We look at the change from year to year. The blended number, though, not changing all that much. Why? When we talk to contact center managers and we say, why don't you have the same agents moving from channel to channel, they often say, because they're not good at it. They're good at answering the phone, but they're not really good at constructing a really well-crafted email. Okay, that may change, especially as text media creeps into the picture, and text media becomes a very important channel of communication, because younger agents are very good at text media, but may also be very good at talking on the phone. So that blended number, we expect it to continue to creep up over time. What would it look like if an agent were literally able to handle multiple channels of communication at the same time? This is our application, EnchHouse. This is what it looks like for us. You're an agent, and you have the ability to see all of the interactions down the left-hand side here. Here's a chat and an email and another chat and a call and an email. And they all stack up, and I've got the ability to move from one to the other. At the same time, I can support that omni-channel journey, because if that patient wants to go from a text message to a phone call, and I'm texting back and forth with them or chatting back and forth, with a single click, I can transform that into a call. And I have all that context and that history of that customer all in one view. So I have that ability to blend these interactions together, see other interactions from that same customer, see the data for that customer, and allow me to sort of move seamlessly across those media channels all in one screen. And this is what it's starting to become all about, is the blurring of the lines between channels and delivering this full omni-channel journey. There's another benefit to blended agents that we sometimes ignore, and that is efficiency. So if this is your call volume through the day, then you've got a staffing level to meet that call volume, and sometimes you're great, and sometimes you're in trouble, because your volume doesn't stay consistent through the day. It kind of goes up and down through peaks and valleys. But if I can offer self-service options, for example, mobile self-service or IVR, then I can move the line down a little bit, because not as many interactions end up with a live agent. And if I can shave time off the calls, then the agents have time to do more calls, and I can move the line down a little bit more. And then maybe I can defer some of those calls to a later time by offering, while they're in queue, a callback option. And so now I'm going to be able to take those peaks and troughs and spread them out over time. And it looks a little bit better. And then maybe I move customers to text channels that are staggered throughout the day, like email, which the expectation of responding to an email is slower than the expectation of responding to a chat or a call. And I can move it down again. So the efficiency play, again, we're satisfying the customer. They want these different channels. At the same time, we're saving money because we're blending the agent workload across an entire day. So there's a benefit there. So what about these digital channels? Same kind of chart as we saw before. These are the techniques that people are using for handling self-service. So IVR is still pretty big. Even though we're moving to text channels, IVR, over half are really truly doing self-service through their IVR. Almost every contact center has an IVR of some kind. You at least have a set of menus that a customer can navigate to get to the right person. But about 50% are actually delivering real self-service through their IVR. But the website FAQs is really high. And then we move kind of down through the list. Interestingly, between a fifth and a third are actually proactively sending out text messages and emails to their customers, between a fifth and a third. So we need to, that's the trend that we see dramatically increasing over time. And then speech-enabled self-service. Here's the interesting bit. Usually it follows this curve, right, where we're seeing the cost have a lower prevalence in the market. But we're starting to see a dramatic improvement or a dramatic growth in the use of automated chatbots or automated virtual assistants. This is becoming more and more common. The Siri, right, that I get access to through iPhone, that helps me with an automated system, usually using cloud services to deliver it. That is a very, very fast-growing trend, and one that we think is going to even grow even faster. And again, it's this ability to deliver service in a very efficient way. The problem with it is right now it's expensive. We've looked at a number of applications for doing this. There are some really cool things. I saw a speech by the Radisson Hotel in London. They've implemented the 200 most common requests for the people who stay in the hotel. You know, what time is room service open till? What is checkout time? Can I get a change of bedding in my room? The 200 most common requests, they've done it. It's phenomenal success at the hotel. It's all done through a chat bot, but it took them 1.5 years to pull it together, and $500,000 in cost. So it's expensive. The end result is fantastic. They've got a great system. People staying in the hotel like it so much, they actually converse with the chatbot like it's a person. Like, how long have you worked here? You know, and then the chatbot comes back and says, I've been operational for 1 year. You know, that kind of thing. So it's an actual conversation. It's a big success, but it was expensive to get there. When you're handling text media, and this is a bit technical, so apologies for that, but you need the ability to have an engine that's scriptable, that can drive notifications out to people so you can be proactive, like we talked about, but then can handle inbound interactions coming back through and open them up and handle them in an intelligent way. So the important thing is that your system be able to handle this automation. And then, of course, you need the ability to go out to mobile apps and mobile websites and have people come back through those mobile apps back into the queue and be able to handle all that in one seamless journey. Again, it's all about the journey and all about seamlessly going from one thing to the next. So what you need is a centralized engine that can pass all forms of communication through it so that it's not siloed anymore. It's one system managing all these omni-channel communications. That's the trick. Here's the other interesting thing that came out of the survey. If you look at the agents, you know, we heard Titch talk a lot about the green and the yellow and the red people, right? How do we make an agent a green person? We reward them. We make them motivated. We engage them. We get them excited about their job. But in the surveys, they looked at what are the characteristics they're encouraging in agents versus what characteristics are they rewarding. And there was an interesting difference between customer satisfaction, encouragement versus reward. So even though encouraged, they're telling their agents it's all about the customer, they're only rewarding it at a much lower level of reward or rate. Rather, they're focusing their attention on the agent's attendance, their punctuality, you know, how well they did in terms of adhering to a schedule. Yeah, those things are important. But if we want our agents to feel empowered, we want them to feel like it's all about the customer, shouldn't we really look at those kinds of things? Again, using those metrics and analytics we talked about earlier and moving that reward up the list and concentrating on how best we can measure and reward the very characteristics that are critically important to us. Agents are a hard game, right? There's a hugely high attrition rate around the world. According to a couple surveys, agent attrition is arguably between 30 and 50% in many contact centers. Amazing statistic, agents don't even show up for their jobs 9% of the time. That's 18, 19 days a year they don't even show up. That's pretty bad, right? We wouldn't expect that from most employees in a business. But if you're able to really reward those agents and really encourage them, then agents want to come to work. They don't want to leave their jobs. They feel empowered. So those are the kinds of things, again, to focus on in this new world that we're talking about. So I kind of said at the beginning I wasn't going to do this, right? I wasn't going to try to look out too far into the future because it's so unpredictable. The nuclear vacuum cleaner doesn't exist, right? But If we look at some of the things that we're seeing today and how those are going to impact us in the future, there are some things that seem to be happening that seem to be good predictors. Virtual assistants and chatbots are definitely going to be really smart. They're getting smarter every single day. They will be an integral part of most contact centers in 5 to 10 years. We're seeing language translation now that is truly amazing. Google Translate can translate virtually any document in seconds. It's amazing. And text, the ability to understand natural language, including spoken text, is improving dramatically year over year. Imagine an agent doesn't even have to speak the same language as the customer they're communicating with, because the system can do the translation for them. That's definitely coming. Is the best resource to help the customer happening to be sitting there right now, sitting at a desk inside the natural boundary of the contact center? Maybe not. The boundaries of the traditional contact center are breaking down. It starts with work-at-home agents who can be physically located anywhere. But over time, is the agent the best resource? Or is it someone else somewhere in your business who maybe part-time works on customer service? That's happening. And then managers will adapt to the way we measure business value and customer experience. This is what's going to happen. It's already happening. And so this is the way we're all going. And I think, the surveys bear this out. The way we're seeing the best contact centers operate bear this out. It's all about making the customer feel like they're the most important thing in the world. Is it okay to say one customer is more important than another? Of course it is. Everyone does it. The airlines do it. The hotels do it. Some customers are just more important. Those customers we need to treat as very special, and we need to measure and improve that over time. And that's what I had. So, thank you very much.
John, just before you go, there are a couple of questions that have come up from Slido. So one of them, take just a quick minute or two. The first one was actually, what are your best recommendations for a contact center starting out managing social media?
Yeah, there's two things with social media that I think are interesting going on right now. One is what you might call standard social media, where you're monitoring Facebook or you're monitoring Twitter, and you're looking for negative sentiment. So you're looking for someone who may have said something negatively about your organization, and then you jump on that. We had a guy who was running marketing for us who was at the airport in Chicago, actually, and he was still another United airline flight was delayed, and he gets on Twitter and he says, here I am again, still another delayed United airline flight. And literally, he said it was less than a minute later, his voice comes over the loudspeaker and they say, Scott, please go to the nearest United service desk. He walked up to a service desk, they gave him a flight on a US Airways flight, not even a United flight. They just moved him like that because it was so important to them to monitor negative sentiment, anything. And he got back on Twitter and said, this is awesome. I mean, it completely turned the situation around. So that's happening. And then the other is the whole instant message through social media phenomenon, Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp and those kinds of things. So in a way, it's kind of like double the problem because I have to monitor the tweets and posts, and I also have to develop a text channel through social media for my business and have it be available in real time. But unfortunately for us as contact center people, we have to worry about both of those channels. And they are different channels, both through social media. But we do have to worry about both.
Second question then is, does Inchhouse have or are you developing an option for customers on the IVR to arrange callbacks via email?
Callbacks via email. Well, it's doable. So you can go into the IVR today, the Inchhouse IVR, and you can ask the IVR for information. You can ask it either for a voice callback from an agent, you can schedule it. It gets scheduled at a particular time, or when the agent is available, and you can retain your position in queue so that you don't lose that position. At the same time, the IVR has now introduced the ability to do proactive text. So it's blurring that omni-channel line again. It can send you a text message or an email with FAQ information. It can all be built and scripted in an automated way. There's some upfront cost to build it using your knowledge and your documents and what you want to send out. But yes, it does work.